Welcome to Crossdressing Stories. Here, we share personal stories, celebrate self-expression. If you're on your own journey or simply curious, you've found your community. Subscribe and join the conversation.
An unforeseen delivery. The life I was living felt like a suit I'd been forced to wear for so long that I'd forgotten it wasn't my own skin. It was a well-tailored suit, I'll admit. From the outside, Ethan Anderson had it all figured out. A stable job as a graphic designer in a respectable downtown firm. A clean, minimalist apartment with a decent view of the city's concrete canyons and a quiet, predictable routine. Wake up, coffee, commute, design, commute, microwave dinner, sleep, repeat. The suit was grey, sensible, and utterly suffocating. I was 32, and the silence in my apartment was often louder than the traffic outside. It was a silence filled with unasked questions, with a longing so deep and nebulous I couldn't give it a name. I just knew I was standing on the edge of my own life, looking in. That Tuesday started like any other. The air was thick with the promise of autumn, and the day had been a blur of RGB codes and client revisions. I walked home, my shoulders tight, my mind numb. As I fumbled for my keys in the hallway, I nearly tripped over it. A cardboard box. It was medium-sized, plain brown, and sitting right in front of my door, Unit 7B. My first thought was that I'd forgotten an online order, but that wasn't it. I hadn't bought anything. Then I saw the shipping label. The address was correct, my address. Right down to the apartment number. But the name printed in bold, black letters, was not mine. Chloe Anderson. My breath caught in my throat. Chloe was my colleague. We shared a last name by coincidence, a fact that had been a mild source of amusement on her first day at the office 6 months ago. She was vibrant and sharp, with a laugh that could cut through the dullest Monday morning meeting. We were friendly, but not have packages sent to my apartment friendly. This had to be a mistake, a mix-up at the post office because of our shared surname. My sensible side, the Ethan Anderson everyone knew, told me to call her immediately. Or maybe leave the box with the building manager. That was the logical, responsible thing to do. But another part of me, a quiet, shadowy part, that I rarely acknowledged, was captivated. There was a small tear in the corner of the box, a jagged wound in the cardboard, and through that wound, I saw a glimpse of something impossible, a flash of deep, shimmering red. It wasn't the practical, muted color of anything I owned. It was the color of wine, of lipstick, of secrets. It was satin, or maybe silk. It looked soft. My heart began to hammer against my ribs. A frantic, trapped bird. The quiet longing inside me suddenly had a voice, and it was whispering, "Look!" I pushed the door open, my hand shaking slightly, and nudged the box inside with my foot, closing and locking the door behind me. The apartment was dim, the evening light filtering weakly through the large window. The box sat in the middle of the floor, an alien object in my sterile, grey world. For 10 minutes, I just stared at it. I told myself I was being ridiculous. It was a woman's package. It was Chloe's. Opening it would be a violation of privacy, a creepy, unforgivable act. But the whisper grew louder. The memory of that flash of red was like a match struck in the darkness of my mind. It was a color that belonged to a different life. A life where things weren't so grey. My hands felt clumsy, my fingers like sausages, as I knelt and carefully widened the tear. The cardboard gave way easily. The red fabric spilled out, cool and slick against my skin. My God, it was beautiful. I pulled it further, revealing the full garment. It was a dress, a long, elegant evening gown, the kind of thing you'd see on a movie star. The material was liquid fire, pooling on my beige carpet. My curiosity had become a physical hunger. I ripped the rest of the tape off the box. Beneath the dress, nestled in white tissue paper, was more. A pair of black stiletto heels, the patent leather gleaming like polished obsidian. The heels were impossibly thin, impossibly high. And under those, a small delicate box. I opened it. Inside lay a set of black lace lingerie, a bra and matching panties. So fine they seemed to be spun from shadow and moonlight. I sat back on my heels, my breathing shallow. This was a complete ensemble, an identity in a box. It was a life, a character, waiting for an actor. The years of repression, of pushing down every strange impulse, every curious thought about what it might be like to be different, came crashing down. The secret fascination I'd had since I was a boy. Flipping through my mother's catalogues and feeling a strange pang of envy at the women's fashion pages, the time I'd secretly tried on her heels when I was 12, stumbling in the darkness of her closet, my heart wild with a thrilling, terrifying shame. It had all been locked away in a part of my soul I never visited. Now, the door to that room had been blown off its hinges. I stood up, my movements stiff and robotic. I walked to my bedroom, undressed, and stood in front of the full-length mirror on my closet door. I saw Ethan, broad shoulders, short brown hair, a body that was serviceable, but uninspired, a stranger. Then, I walked back to the living room. My hands trembled as I picked up the lace panties. The fabric was so light, it felt like nothing. I stepped into them, the delicate material a shocking alien sensation against my skin. Then the bra. I fumbled with the clasp at the back, my fingers clumsy and useless. After several frustrating minutes, I finally managed to hook it. It was tight, constricting, yet the pressure around my chest felt anchoring. Next, the dress. I stepped into the pool of red silk, pulling it up over my body. It was a struggle. It wasn't designed for a man's frame. But as I pulled and adjusted, it settled. The fabric clung to my waist and hips in a way my own clothes never did. I reached back, found the zipper, and slowly, carefully, pulled it up. The soft hiss of the zipper was the only sound in the room. The dress was on. It felt like a second skin, a vibrant, electric skin that hummed with a strange energy. I looked down at the red fabric flowing to the floor, at the way it hugged my torso. Finally, the shoes. I sat on the edge of my sofa and slid my feet into them. They were a perfect, snug fit. Standing up was a different matter entirely. I wobbled, my ankles screaming in protest as my entire weight shifted onto the balls of my feet. I grabbed the back of the sofa for support, my knuckles white. The shoes forced a change in my posture, pushing my chest forward, arching my back. They made me taller, more precarious, but also more graceful. It was a paradox of vulnerability and power. I took a few shaky, uncertain steps toward the bedroom mirror, each one a monumental effort of balance and will. I felt like a newborn foal, all legs and no coordination. When I finally reached the mirror, I held my breath and looked up. It wasn't Ethan. The person in the mirror was a stranger, tall, impossibly so in the heels. The red dress created curves where there were none, hinting at a feminine shape that both was and wasn't mine. The broadness of my shoulders seemed less severe in the context of the elegant neckline. My face was still my face-strong jaw, short hair, but it was jarringly out of place above that dress. It didn't fit. But behind the dissonance, behind the shock, a tiny spark ignited. The reflection was alien. And yet, in a way I couldn't explain, it was also the most honest image I had ever seen of myself. It felt like I was looking at a half-finished portrait, a glimpse of a truth I had spent my entire life pretending did not exist. A part of me, a deep, hidden part, rose to the surface and whispered a single, breathtaking word. Hello. A call and a collapse. I stood there for what felt like an eternity, swaying slightly in the heels, my hands tracing the seams of the red dress. The mirror showed me a creature of contradictions, a man's face on a woman's silhouette, a ghost in a borrowed costume. The initial shock began to fade, replaced by a dizzying cocktail of emotions. There was shame, hot and sharp, coiling in my gut. What kind of man does this? But there was also a wild, exhilarating thrill, a sense of liberation so potent it made me lightheaded. I was breaking 1,000 unspoken rules, and it felt like breathing for the first time. I practiced walking, back and forth across my bedroom, from the mirror to the window. Each step was a tiny victory. I started to get the rhythm of it, the necessary shift in balance, the swing of the hips that the heels demanded. I imagined myself as someone else, someone confident and glamorous. The red dress swished around my legs, a constant, silky reminder of my transgression. It was a fantasy, a dangerous, beautiful fantasy, and I was completely lost in it. And then, the phone rang. The shrill, electronic noise shattered the spell. It was my cell phone. Buzzing angrily on the kitchen counter, my heart leaped into my throat. Reality came crashing back in like a tidal wave. I was a man, in my apartment, wearing a woman's evening gown. My colleague's evening gown. I stumbled out of the bedroom, my graceful walk forgotten. I was a clumsy oaf in heels again. I snatched the phone off the counter, my hands slick with sweat. The screen glowed with a picture of Chloe, a smiling selfie she used for her contact ID. My mind raced. Don't answer. Let it go to voicemail. But what would I say when she left a message? What excuse could I possibly give? Maybe if I answered, I could play it cool. Pretend I just got home and hadn't even seen the box. Yes. That was it. Lie. Lie through your teeth. I swiped to answer, my voice catching in my throat. Hello. I tried to sound normal, casual, like the Ethan she knew. It came out as a weak, strangled croak. Ethan. Oh, thank God you answered. Chloe's voice was a rush of frantic energy, a stark contrast to my frozen panic. I am so sorry to bother you, but I think I'm having a massive postal service nightmare. You and I have the same last name, and I think a package of mine, a really important one, might have been delivered to your apartment by mistake. I leaned against the counter for support. The cool granite a stark contrast to the hot flush spreading across my face and chest. Oh, I said, my voice barely a whisper. A package. Yes, it's from a boutique downtown. It has a dress in it for a wedding. I'm going to this weekend. I've been tracking it all day, and it says, delivered. But it's not here. Please tell me there's a brown box sitting outside your door. My eyes darted to the empty, torn open box on my living room floor. The tissue paper was strewn about like fallen snow. The evidence of my crime was everywhere. My brain was short-circuiting. The lie I had so carefully constructed a moment ago evaporated. All I could feel was the slinky fabric of the dress against my skin, the tight band of the bra around my chest, the impossible height of the heels. I was a fraud, a pervert, a thief. The shame was a physical force, pressing down on me, squeezing the air from my lungs. "Ethan, are you there?" Her voice was laced with concern now. And then, the words just fell out of my mouth. I didn't plan them. I didn't even think them. They were a confession torn from the deepest, most terrified part of me. I opened it, Chloe." Silence. A complete and total void on the other end of the line. It stretched for 5 seconds, then 10. It was the loudest silence I had ever heard, in that chasm of quiet. My entire life seemed to crumble. I had just admitted the unthinkable. She would be disgusted. She would report me to HR. I would be fired. I would be a pariah. The office creep. The story would follow me forever. My grey, sensible suit was in tatters, and I was standing naked and exposed in the ruins. And, I added, my voice cracking, because what difference did it make? Now the dam was broken. I tried it on. I closed my eyes, waiting for the explosion, the anger, the disgust, the horrified gasp. Instead, after another beat of silence, I heard a sound. It was a soft, breathy noise, a puff of air, and then a quiet, gentle laugh. It wasn't a laugh of mockery. It wasn't cruel. It was soft. It sounded bewildered, maybe, but unbelievably, it sounded warm. My eyes snapped open. "What?" I whispered. You tried it on," she said, and there was an unmistakable note of amusement, of sheer, unadulterated surprise in her voice. The whole thing, the dress, the shoes. I couldn't speak. I just made a small, pathetic sound of affirmation. "Wow," she breathed. There was another pause. But this one felt different. It was thoughtful, not accusatory. "Okay, well, that's unexpected." My shame was still there, but a new feeling was pushing up through it, utter confusion. This was not the reaction I had prepared for. I had braced for a hurricane and was met with a light breeze. "Chloe, I am so sorry," I stammered, the words tumbling over each other. I don't know what came over me. I saw the tear in the box, and I'll pay for it, for the cleaning, for anything. I'm so ashamed. Hey, she said, her voice gentle and calming now. "It's okay. Breathe. Ethan." I took a ragged, shuddering breath. "Look," she continued, her tone shifting from surprised to something else. Something I couldn't quite decipher. It was curious. "I'm not angry. I'm intrigued. Honestly, my first thought is that you must have ridiculously good taste to have even ordered that dress for me." "I didn't order it," I mumbled. I know, it was a joke," she said softly. Then she hesitated for a moment before speaking again, her voice dropping a little lower. "I have to ask, Ethan, what do you look like?" The question hung in the air between us, charged with a strange intimacy. It wasn't a demand, it was a genuine question. I don't know," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "Ridiculous!" "I doubt that," she said. And then she made the request that would change everything. "Can I see?" I froze. "What?" "Can I come over? I'm only a few blocks away." "I won't be mad. I promise. I feel like this is a moment that I need to witness for myself." My mind was a battlefield. One part was screaming, No, absolutely not. Take the dress off, pack it up, and leave it on her doorstep. It was the voice of self-preservation, the voice of Ethan Anderson, but another voice, the new, fragile voice that had been born in front of the mirror, whispered. Yes, it was a terrifying thought, letting someone else see this, letting Chloe see this, but underneath the terror was a desperate, aching need for, what? Forgiveness, understanding, or maybe just to not be alone with this massive, life-altering secret for one more second. Her reaction on the phone had been a tiny pinprick of light in my suffocating darkness. Maybe, just maybe, she wouldn't be disgusted. Maybe she would see what I had seen in the mirror, not a monster, but just someone else. Okay, I heard myself say, the word a mere exhalation of air. Okay, you can come over. A wave of relief and pure, unadulterated terror washed over me in equal measure. I had just invited the sole witness of my secret self into my home. There was no going back now. The reflection in another's eyes. The 15 minutes between hanging up the phone and the buzz of my intercom were the longest of my life. I paced the apartment, a frantic, 6-foot-tall woman in a red dress and killer heels. My walk was still a clumsy shuffle, my nerves having completely undone the little progress I'd made. What had I done? This was madness. I should take it all off, throw on my jeans and a hoodie, and pretend the phone call was a hallucination. But I couldn't. Some stubborn, defiant part of me refused to hide. I had confessed. The secret was out. At least to one person. To retreat now felt like a betrayal of that terrifying moment of honesty. So I stayed in the dress, my heart beating a frantic rhythm against the delicate lace of the bra. When the buzzer finally sounded, I jumped. A jolt of pure adrenaline shooting through me. I pressed the button to let her in, my hand trembling. The walk to the door was a tightrope act of terror and anticipation. I took a deep breath, turned the knob, and pulled the door open. Chloe stood there, a bottle of white wine in one hand and her purse in the other. She wore simple jeans and a sweater, and her hair was tied back in a messy bun. She looked normal, casual. She looked at me, her eyes wide. She took in the entire picture, the dress, the heels, my panicked, deer-in-the-headlights expression. Her lips parted slightly, but she didn't say a word. She just looked. I felt like an insect under a microscope. Every flaw, every masculine angle, every bit of my fraudulence exposed. I wanted the floor to swallow me whole. Then, she smiled. It was a slow, gentle smile that reached her eyes. It held no judgment, no mockery. It was filled with a kind of sincere, astonished curiosity. "Wow," she said, her voice soft. "Okay, you were right. Not ridiculous at all." She stepped inside, and I moved back numbly to let her pass. "Honestly, Ethan, you look kind of incredible. I think you might wear it better than I would have." The compliment landed in the swirling chaos of my mind and anchored me. It was so unexpected, so genuine, that it short-circuited my panic. "I don't think so," I managed to stammer. "I do," she said, placing the wine on the kitchen counter. "Now, where are your glasses? I feel like this situation definitely calls for wine." While I fumbled in the cupboard for 2 wine glasses, my movements still stiff and awkward, she walked slowly around the living room, taking in the scene, the open box, the discarded tissue paper. She wasn't snooping. She was simply observing, a silent witness to the strange event that had unfolded here. She poured the wine, her movements calm and steady, a stark contrast to my own inner turmoil. She handed me a glass, her fingers brushing against mine. The simple human contact was grounding. "So," she said, leaning against the counter and taking a sip. "Talk to me. What happened?" And so, I told her. The words came out in a jumbled, halting rush. I told her about the long day, the discovery of the box, the irresistible pull of the red fabric. I tried to explain the secret fascination I'd carried my whole life. The feeling of being a spectator in my own biography. I talked about the moment I saw myself in the mirror. The bizarre mix of alienation and recognition. I confessed everything, laying bare the decades of shame and confusion. She listened. She just stood there, swirling the wine in her glass, her eyes never leaving my face. She didn't interrupt. She didn't look away. She gave me the profound gift of her complete, undivided attention. It was perhaps the first time in my life I had ever spoken about this part of myself, and the act of giving it voice, of having it heard without condemnation, was a release so powerful it almost brought me to my knees. When I finished, my throat was raw. The apartment was quiet again. "Thank you for telling me that," she said simply. Then, a playful glint appeared in her eyes. "You know," she said, "the look is good. It's a great start. But it's not finished." "What do you mean?" She put down her glass and walked towards me. "Your face," she said, gesturing gently. "It's still Ethan's face. The dress needs a different co-star." She stopped in front of me and looked at my face with the critical eye of an artist. "You have great bone structure. You know that, good cheekbones." My heart started hammering again, but for a different reason. She was so close I could smell the faint, clean scent of her shampoo. "Wait here," she said, and disappeared back into the hallway. She returned a moment later with her purse, from which she produced a small, black makeup bag. "I am by no means a professional," she said, unzipping it, "but I know my way around some foundation. May I?" I was speechless. I could only nod. She led me to the bathroom, the brightest room in the apartment. She had me sit on the closed toilet lid while she laid out her tools on the counter bottles, brushes, pencils, palettes. It was a dizzying, mysterious array. "Okay," she said, her voice taking on a focused, professional tone. "Let's begin." What followed was one of the most surreal and intimate experiences of my life. She started with foundation, dabbing the cool liquid onto my skin with a soft sponge. Her touch was gentle, impersonal, yet incredibly personal. I watched in the mirror as the faint stubble on my jaw, the tired shadows under my eyes, began to soften and disappear under a smooth, even canvas. She shaped my eyebrows, plucking a few stray hairs with a quick, painless efficiency. She used eyeshadows in warm, subtle shades of brown and gold to add depth to my eyes, her fingers lightly brushing my eyelids. I had never had someone so close to my face, so focused on me. I held my breath, afraid to move. "Okay, look up," she commanded softly. She applied mascara with a delicate, practiced hand, the tiny brush tickling my lashes. Then, eyeliner, a thin, dark line that made my eyes look larger, more defined. She contoured my cheeks, creating a softer, more feminine shape. The face in the mirror was transforming. With each step, each brushstroke, Ethan was receding, and a new person was emerging. A softer, prettier person. A woman. "The final touch," Chloe whispered. She twisted open a tube of lipstick. It was the same deep, rich red as the dress. She carefully, expertly, painted my lips. The cool, waxy feeling was strange, but the splash of color was a revelation. It tied everything together. She stood back, her head tilted, assessing her work. "One more thing," she said. She reached into the larger shopping bag she'd brought her purse in, which I hadn't even noticed, and pulled out another box. Inside was a wig. It was a beautiful, shoulder-length bob, the color of dark chocolate. "When I realized you'd tried on the dress, I had a hunch," she said with a little smile. "I stopped at a shop on the way over, just in case." She gently placed the wig on my head, her fingers carefully arranging the hair to frame my new face, tucking it behind my ears. She adjusted the fringe, her brow furrowed in concentration. The synthetic hair felt soft against my neck and cheeks. When she was satisfied, she took my hands and pulled me to my feet, turning me to face the mirror. I gasped. The person staring back at me was a complete stranger, a strikingly elegant woman in a red dress. Her makeup was flawless. Her hair was perfect. Her eyes, my eyes, looked back at me with an expression of pure, unadulterated shock. It was me, but it wasn't me at all. It was the finished portrait. "Hello," Chloe said softly, her reflection standing beside the woman in the mirror. "It's nice to meet you." Tears pricked my eyes. This was the person I had glimpsed earlier. But now she was real. She was complete. She was beautiful. "What's her name?" Chloe asked gently. The name came to me instantly. A whisper from that same deep place the longing had always lived. It felt as right, as inevitable, as the red dress. "Claire," I whispered, my newly colored lips forming the word. "Her name is Claire." Chloe smiled, a wide, beautiful smile. "Claire," she repeated. "It suits you, it really does." In that moment, standing in my brightly lit bathroom, the scent of wine and makeup in the air, I felt like I had been seen. Truly seen. For the very first time in my life. And the person who saw me wasn't disgusted. She was smiling. First steps into a new world. That night was the beginning. It wasn't just a strange, isolated incident anymore. It was a door that had been opened. And Chloe was holding it for me. The person who left my apartment that night wasn't just my colleague. She was my confidant, my co-conspirator. And the person who remained wasn't just Ethan. Claire was there now, too. She was no longer a ghost in the mirror. She was a tangible presence, a promise. We made a pact. Chloe would keep my secret, and she would help me explore this new, bewildering territory. Our weekends became a secret project. My Spartan apartment, once a symbol of my empty life, transformed into Claire's sanctuary. Our first official outing as the girls was to a mall in a neighboring town, a place where no one would know us. The plan was for me to go as Ethan, and we would shop for Claire. The drive there was a nerve-wracking ordeal. Every car that passed felt like it was full of people who could somehow see my secret. "Relax," Chloe said, sensing my tension. "We're just two friends shopping. It's the most normal thing in the world." But it didn't feel normal. Walking into the women's section of a large department store felt like crossing an international border without a passport. The air was different, perfumed with a dozen competing fragrances. The landscape was a dizzying sea of colors, textures, and shapes I had only ever observed from a safe distance. Chloe was my guide. She was patient and intuitive. seeming to understand my fear and excitement all at once. She'd hold up a blouse and say, "This blue would look amazing with your eyes." Or grab a pair of tailored trousers and say, "These would give you a great line." She spoke of Claire in the third person, which made it feel safer, less personal. We were curating a wardrobe for a friend. The first time she nudged me toward the dressing rooms with a handful of clothes, I froze. "I can't," I whispered, my throat tight. "I can't go in there." "Yes, you can," she said, her voice firm but kind. "No one is paying attention, I promise. Just walk in like you belong there." My heart hammered as I walked into the curtained cubicle. It was a tiny, private space, a world unto itself. With trembling hands, I shed my Ethan costume, the jeans, the polo shirt, and put on the first outfit, a simple, dark wash pair of skinny jeans, a soft cashmere sweater in a lovely cream color, and a pair of ankle boots with a low, chunky heel that Chloe had insisted were essential for beginners. When I stepped out to show her, I felt incredibly exposed. The fit of the jeans was a completely new sensation, hugging my legs from hip to ankle. But Chloe's reaction was immediate and reassuring. "See?" she said, beaming. "Perfect. You look comfortable. You look normal." That word normal was a balm to my frayed nerves. We spent 3 hours there. I tried on dresses, skirts, blouses, and jackets. With each new garment, a little more of the fear chipped away, replaced by a growing sense of discovery. I was learning the language of fabrics and cuts, discovering what felt right, not just on my body, but on Claire's body. We left with several bags, my credit card significantly lighter, but my spirits soaring. The weekends became Claire's time to live. Saturday mornings would start with the ritual of transformation. I'd shower, shave more carefully than I ever had in my life, and then, piece by piece, I would become Claire. It started with the clothes, then the makeup, which Chloe taught me to apply myself through patient tutorials, and finally, the wig. Each time I looked in the mirror, Claire's image became less shocking and more familiar. She was starting to feel less like a character and more like an extension of myself. Chloe taught me the little things: how to sit in a skirt, how to walk more fluidly in heels, how to carry a purse so it didn't look like a foreign object. We practiced modulating my voice, not aiming for a high-pitched imitation, but a softer, lighter version of my own. We'd sit in my apartment, drinking tea and just talking, with me as Claire, getting used to the feeling of existing in the world as her. But this dual existence created a new kind of turmoil. Mondays became harder than ever. Squeezing myself back into the Ethan suit felt physically painful. The stiff collars, the heavy shoes, the expectation to be one of the guys at the office, it all felt like a lie. I'd sit in meetings, listening to discussions about branding and ad campaigns, and my mind would be miles away, thinking about the feel of a silk scarf or the satisfying click of heels on pavement. Claire was vibrant and exciting. Ethan was a grey ghost haunting a cubicle. The contrast was becoming unbearable. Who was the real person? And who was the costume I was beginning to suspect I had it backwards all along? After a month of these secret weekends, Chloe announced that Claire was ready for her debut. "My friend Maya is having a small party at her apartment," she said one Saturday afternoon as Claire, was practicing my walk in a new pair of wedges. "It's just going to be a few people, all good-hearted, open-minded types. I think you should come." Panic flared in my chest. No, I can't. In my apartment is one thing, but out there with other people. It's the next step, she insisted. You can't stay cooped up in here forever. Claire deserves to have a life, and I'll be right there with you. I trusted Chloe. Her judgment had been flawless so far. So, with a sense of impending doom, mixed with a thrilling spark of anticipation, I agreed. The night of the party. I must have changed my outfit 5 times. I finally settled on a knee-length navy blue dress, simple and elegant, paired with nude heels. My makeup took an hour, my hands shaking so badly I had to redo my eyeliner twice. By the time Chloe arrived to pick me up, I was a wreck. "You look beautiful," she said, her calm voice a soothing presence. "Ready?" "No," I squeaked, but I followed her out the door anyway. The party was in a cozy apartment downtown. The moment we walked in, I felt a dozen pairs of eyes on me. My instinct was to shrink, to become invisible. But Chloe put a steadying hand on the small of my back and guided me forward. "Everyone, this is my friend, Claire," she announced to the room at large. A few people smiled and said hello, and then they went back to their conversations. There was no gasp of shock, no pointing, no whispering. They accepted Chloe's introduction at face value. A woman named Claire had arrived at the party. It was that simple. The relief was so profound, I felt weak in the knees. Chloe got us both a drink, and we stood near the edge of the room. A few of her friends came over to chat. They were kind and welcoming, asking Claire where she was from and what she did. And I found myself answering with a slightly edited version of my own life story. The words felt strange, but true coming out of my mouth. Later in the evening, as music played softly in the background, a man I hadn't spoken to yet approached me. He was tall, with kind eyes and a friendly smile. "Hi," he said. "I'm Mark. My friends have been monopolizing you all night. I just wanted to say that I love your dress." "Oh, thank you," I managed, my heart doing a little flip-flop. "I don't think we've danced yet," he said, gesturing toward the small space in the living room where a few couples were swaying to the music. "Would you like to—" My mind went completely blank. A man was asking me, Claire, to dance. It was something so far outside the realm of my wildest fantasies that I couldn't process it. I looked at Chloe across the room, and she gave me a small, encouraging nod. "I'd love to," I heard Claire say. He led me to the floor and gently took my hand, placing his other on my waist. I was stiff as a board, my mind racing. Don't step on his feet. Don't be awkward. Act natural. The song was slow, something soulful and soft. He pulled me a little closer, and I could smell his cologne. He was a perfect gentleman, leading me with a quiet confidence. And as we swayed to the music, surrounded by the low hum of conversation and laughter, something inside me settled. For the first time, I wasn't just wearing a costume. I wasn't an actor playing a part. I was Claire, and I was dancing. The feeling was pure, unadulterated joy. For those 3 minutes, in the arms of a kind stranger, I was not in conflict. I was not Ethan or Claire. I was just me. And I was happy. The cracks in the facade. The dance was a turning point. It had unlocked a feeling of rightness, of pure, uncomplicated joy that I'd never known. But in doing so, it also made the return to my daily life as Ethan almost unbearable. The grey suit felt heavier, the polite masculine nods in the hallway more performative, the sound of my own name more jarring. The world saw me as Ethan, but I had danced as Claire. The disconnect was no longer a quiet, internal struggle. It was a gaping chasm that threatened to swallow me whole. My work began to suffer. I found it impossible to concentrate on color palettes and font pairings when my mind was consumed with a crisis of identity. I was exhausted, not from the work itself, but from the constant, draining effort of playing a role that no longer fit. I was irritable and distant. Chloe noticed. Of course. "You look tired," she said one afternoon, stopping by my desk with 2 cups of coffee. "I am," I admitted, rubbing my temples. "I feel fractured. Like I'm 2 different people, and they're at war with each other, and I think Ethan is losing." "Maybe he's supposed to," she said gently, her words landing with a quiet, profound impact. That evening, I went home and broke down. I put on one of Claire's simple cotton dresses, no makeup, no wig, and just sat on my sofa and cried. I cried for the years I had lost, for the person I had never allowed myself to be. I cried out of fear for the future and grief for a past that was built on a lie. When the tears finally subsided, a single, terrifying, liberating thought remained. I couldn't do this anymore. I couldn't be Ethan anymore. Claire wasn't a hobby or a persona. She was me. The next day, I asked Chloe if she could help me find someone to talk to. I knew I couldn't navigate this alone. She didn't hesitate. She spent her lunch break researching and, by the end of the day, had given me the name of a therapist who specialized in gender identity issues. Making that first call was one of the hardest things I've ever done. Admitting to a stranger that my entire life felt like a mistake took a courage I didn't know I possessed. Dr. Evans had a kind, calm voice that immediately put me at ease. We scheduled my first appointment. The therapy sessions were like slowly, carefully excavating an archaeological site. Dr. Evans gave me the language to understand what I was feeling. Words like gender dysphoria and gender identity. We unpacked my childhood, the subtle moments of feeling different, the shame and confusion that I had buried for decades. Talking about it, putting it all out in the open in that safe, confidential space, was like lancing a wound. It was painful, but it was the start of healing. With Chloe's unwavering support and Dr. Evans' professional guidance, I began to accept the truth. I was a woman. Ethan was the mask I had worn to survive in a world that hadn't offered me any other options. Claire was my authentic self. The acceptance of that truth was one thing. Acting on it was another. The thought of coming out, of telling the world, was petrifying. I decided to start small. My first step was an email to HR, requesting a meeting to discuss a personal matter. I then told my direct manager. His reaction was one of bewildered surprise, but to his credit, he was professional. He listened, asked respectful questions, and promised the company's support. The next step was telling my colleagues. An office-wide memo was sent out, explaining that Ethan Anderson would henceforth be known as Claire Anderson and would be using she/her pronouns. The day I walked into the office for the first time as Claire was the most terrifying day of my life. I wore a conservative but stylish blouse and trousers, my hair in the dark bob wig, my makeup subtle. The reactions were a mixed bag. Some people were wonderful, making a clear effort to use my new name and pronouns immediately. Others were awkward, avoiding eye contact. A few shot me looks that ranged from pity to thinly veiled disgust. Chloe was my shield that day, staying close, offering a smile of encouragement whenever I faltered. It was brutal, but I survived it. The hardest part was family. I wrote a long, heartfelt letter to my parents, who lived in a different state. The phone call that followed was strained and painful. My mother cried, asking what she had done wrong. My father was silent. His disapproval a heavy weight on the line. They didn't understand. They said they needed time. It broke my heart, but I knew I couldn't go back. I had to keep moving forward, even if it meant moving forward alone. One evening, about a week after the disastrous call with my parents, the weight of it all became too much. The pressure at work, the constant fear of judgment, the ache of my family's rejection. It all came crashing down. I was at my apartment, trying to make dinner, when I just started sobbing. Great. Heaving sobs of grief and exhaustion. I called the only person I knew would understand. I called Chloe. Can you please come over? I choked out between sobs. She was there in 10 minutes. She didn't say a word when I opened the door. She just opened her arms, and I collapsed into them, crying into her shoulder like a child. She held me, stroking my hair, murmuring soft, comforting words. Her embrace was a safe harbor in the storm that was my life. We ended up on the sofa, my legs tucked under me, my head resting on her lap as she gently played with my hair. The tears had stopped, leaving behind a hollowed-out calm. I don't know if I can do this, I whispered to the ceiling. It's too hard. You can, she said softly. You are the bravest person I know. Claire. Hearing her say my name, so naturally, so full of conviction, was like a balm to my soul. I turned my head, looking up at her. The apartment was dim, the only light coming from a single lamp, casting soft shadows on her face. Her expression was one of such profound tenderness and care that it made my breath catch. In that moment, the line between us blurred. She wasn't just my friend, my mentor, my ally. She was something more. The bond we had forged through this extraordinary journey was deeper than friendship. It was a unique, powerful intimacy built on shared secrets and absolute trust. Slowly, I reached up and touched her cheek. She leaned into my touch, her eyes fluttering closed for a second. The air between us grew thick, charged with an unspoken emotion that had been building for months. This wasn't just gratitude, it was affection, deep and real. She looked down at me, her gaze soft and searching. She leaned down, and I lifted my head slightly to meet her. Her lips were soft as she pressed a gentle, chaste kiss to my forehead. It wasn't a kiss of passion, but of something far more profound. It was a kiss of acceptance, of comfort, of love in its purest form. You are not alone in this, she whispered against my skin. Ever. Lying there in the quiet of my apartment, held by the one person in the world who truly saw me. I knew she was right. The road ahead was still long and uncertain, but I wouldn't have to walk it by myself. The woman in the red dress. 1 year later, the reflection in the mirror was no longer a stranger. The woman who looked back at me was Claire. The wig was gone, replaced by my own hair, which had grown into a chic, shoulder-length style, the same dark chocolate color as the wig I'd first worn. My face was softer, not just from the subtle effects of hormone therapy, which I'd started 6 months ago, but from the simple absence of tension. The permanent frown lines on Ethan's forehead had been replaced by the faint laugh lines around Claire's eyes. Life was life. It wasn't a fairy tale, but it was real, and it was mine. The initial storm at the office had passed, giving way to a new normal. Most people had adapted. My new name and pronouns became second nature to them. My work had not only recovered, but had improved. I brought a new perspective. a new confidence to my designs. I had even been asked to lead a new diversity and inclusion initiative in the company's branding department, a role in which I found unexpected purpose. I was no longer hiding, I was visible, and I was using that visibility to make a small difference. My relationship with my parents was still a work in progress, a slow, careful dance of letters and brief, stilted phone calls. There was still pain and confusion. But there were also tiny glimmers of hope, small questions about my life that suggested they were trying, in their own way, to understand. It wasn't the unconditional love I dreamed of, but it was a start. And then there was Chloe. Our relationship had evolved into something beautiful and undefined. We were best friends, soulmates, partners in every sense of the word, except for a label. The gentle kiss on the forehead that night had opened a door to a new level of physical and emotional intimacy. We held hands when we walked down the street. We shared quiet dinners that felt more like dates. We ended most days together, talking on the sofa, her head on my shoulder, or mine on hers. It was a slow, gentle romance, built not on fiery passion, but on a foundation of profound respect, care, and a shared history that was uniquely ours. We hadn't rushed it. We were letting it become whatever it was meant to be. And it was perfect. To mark the 1-year anniversary of that fateful evening, the evening Claire was named, I decided to host a small party at my apartment. It was a celebration not just of a date on the calendar, but of survival, of authenticity, of friendship. The guest list was small but meaningful, a few of the open-minded friends I'd met at that first party, a couple of supportive colleagues from work, and of course, Chloe. As I got ready, I thought about what to wear. The choice was obvious. I opened a garment bag at the back of my closet, one I hadn't touched in months. The red dress slid out, the fabric just as vibrant and lustrous as I remembered when I had first worn it. It was a costume, a secret, a symbol of a forbidden fantasy. Tonight, it would be something else entirely. I zipped it up, the motion now familiar and easy. I slipped on the black stiletto heels, my balance steady and sure after a year of practice. I sat at the small vanity table Chloe had helped me pick out and did my makeup with a calm, confident hand. As I applied the final slick of red lipstick, I smiled at my reflection. There was no dissonance anymore, no conflict. There was only Claire. The party was warm and joyful. My apartment, once a sterile grey box, was filled with laughter, music, and the clinking of glasses. I moved through the small crowd, feeling completely at ease, completely myself. I saw Chloe across the room, watching me. She was wearing a simple, elegant black dress, and her eyes shone with a pride that made my heart swell. She raised her glass to me in a silent toast. Later in the evening, when most of the guests had left, Chloe and I stood by the large window, looking out at the city lights twinkling in the September night. It was the same view Ethan had stared at with a sense of empty detachment, but for Claire, it was beautiful, full of life and promise. "It's amazing to think," I said softly, "that it all started with a mistake, a simple delivery mix-up." "It wasn't a mistake," Chloe said, turning to face me. "It was fate. The universe knew that dress belonged to you, not me." She reached out and took my hand, her fingers lacing through mine. "I'm so proud of you, Claire. Not just for becoming who you are, but for having the courage to find her in the first place." Tears welled in my eyes, but they were happy tears. I thought about the man who had lived in this apartment a year ago. A man so lost and lonely, he didn't even realize how much of himself was missing. He was a ghost, a sketch of a person. I couldn't have done it without you, I whispered, my voice thick with emotion. You didn't just give me a dress, Chloe. You gave me permission to be myself. You saw Claire before I even knew she existed. She smiled, her thumb gently stroking the back of my hand. She was always there. She just needed a little help opening the box. I raised my glass, the crystal chiming softly against the window pane. I looked at my reflection, a woman in a red dress, silhouetted against the sparkling city. She was strong. She was happy. She was real. I turned to the woman beside me, the catalyst, the anchor, the love of my life. To accidental deliveries, I said, my voice clear and steady, and to finding out where you truly belong. She lifted her own glass, her eyes locking with mine, full of a shared past and a hopeful future. To Claire, she said, and as we touched our glasses together, I knew, with a certainty that filled every part of my being, that I was finally home.